Well, let's get back to the return of Parliament. Elizabeth May is the Green Party leader and for the 5th time elected in the BC riding of Saanich Gulf Islands. Ms. May, good to see you again.
It's very lovely to see you again, Michael, and to be back in Ottawa.
Be back in Ottawa.
It's like back at school after what kind of a weird, it wasn't summer, we just weren't here.
But busy while you weren't here. And you know, once you did return, there was of course talk that you were considering putting your name forward to be the Speaker of the House of Commons. You decided not to. You decided it was more important to represent the Green Party in the House. But I do wonder, what was it about the Speaker's role that made that possibility appealing for you?
It has been for me forever, and some of the news coverage has said I tried other times. I've never tried. To try to run for Speaker, you have to write people and say, I want you to vote for me. And I've never been in a position where I felt right saying that. But I'm obsessed about parliamentary procedure. I sometimes kid around with the table officers, you know, in Parliament and say, I want to be like Stanley Knowles. And in my 90s, I want to be the honorary table officer. Many of your viewers will not know that the late and wonderful Stanley Knowles, who was early NDPer, was in his 80s and 90s preferred to sit at the desk on the table in the proceedings of the House of Commons because he was just someone who loved Parliament. I love Parliament that much, and I would love to see our rules obeyed, and I like to think that maybe I could pull that off, but at this point the timing couldn't be worse to have put my name forward. And basically everybody's name is there to become Speaker unless you proactively withdraw it.
Which you did.
I did.
Which you did. But you know, when you talk about this passion for Parliament, how much of it has to do with decorum? Because it seemed to me that is what you were signaling you wanted the House to get back to, a sense of decorum that perhaps as a Speaker what you thought you might be able to bring about?
Well, I know that from my constituents, and when I was first running in Saanich Gulf Islands in 2011, and you run for office and the notion is everybody's making promises, right? I wasn't going to make a single promise I couldn't keep. So I could only promise things that I knew I could deliver. I knew I wasn't going to be Prime Minister if I won in 2011, defeating a sitting member of Stephen Harper's cabinet. All I could do was know that I would be the only Green member of Parliament. What could I promise? I could promise never to heckle. I could promise to try to make my constituents proud of my conduct. And that's what I've never heckled. I tell you, I've been tempted, and I get heckled all the time. I just said, okay, it's decorum, but it's more than that. It's respect for institutions. It's respect for democracy. It's not allowing our Parliament to be hijacked by dirty tricks and hyper-partisanship. And really, our democracy is in peril when our citizens look at what's going on in Parliament and think, I don't want to watch that anymore. That's really... And when you see school groups get up and leave from the gallery because the teachers think, this is not what I want my students to see, this conduct wouldn't be permissible in my classroom, that bothers me a lot.
It bothers you, but how does it get in the way of democracy and the work that's meant to be done by this House? Because, you know, I do, to your point, I've heard from many Canadians throughout my career saying, you know, how can you watch that? How can you listen to that? What is actually getting done?
Well, I'll give you one example of where our rules, actually, the rules of Parliament, you'll be astonished to hear, include no one's allowed to read a written speech. Not allowed to stand there and read. Now, we all know that every single day that the backroom people in every party grab an MP who's unsuspecting and say, here's the speech, go in, you're reading it now. What that does is it means that when the House leaders sit down and say, how many speakers do we need on X piece of legislation? Whatever party is in opposition can say, well, I don't know, maybe everybody. If you had to get up and give a speech without reading it, how many people could they count on to know the subject well enough to give a speech without notes? Not that many. The Parliament of Westminster in London has the same rules as the Parliament in Ottawa. In the Parliament of Westminster, if people watch those debate proceedings, they'll know pretty quickly that nobody's standing there reading a speech written by somebody else that looks like bad high school drama while people stand up and read a speech. We could get bills through the House more efficiently if no one was allowed to read a written speech, which is actually the rule. So there's things, many of them like that, that are persnickety and down in the weeds. But I'm a nerd, and one of these days, you know, I'm only 70, maybe next time I'll run for Speaker.
That is true. You know, but there is a Speaker now in the chair. Will you be appealing to him to actually enforce those rules?
Constantly, and I've started already. constantly. And it's hard because once something becomes a habit and a bad habit, it's hard for, particularly in this system where the large parties have so much sway, it's really hard to get a speaker to, for instance, say, I'm not going to follow the list of speakers in the order that the whip has given them to me. I am, because that's the rules, only the speaker has the right to decide who speaks next. And yet every speaker we've had since the 1980s has abided by this non-rule. One time only, Michael, Jean Sauvé was Speaker of the House and said, I'm having trouble seeing across the room. Could the whip do me a favor and give me a list of who the X-party whip wants to recognize and in what order, just to make it easier? That's the basis on which every speaker since has taken a list from the whip and goes through them in order. What that does is it communicates to a backbencher, if I want to get on the news tonight in my own riding, the person I want to please is my whip, not the speaker. That's what's undermining decorum.
Okay, well, a very interesting fact to raise, so we'll see how that progresses. But, you know, before you and I are done, I do also want to talk about what your priorities are going to be beyond creating a House and being a member of Parliament that your constituents can be proud of. How will you move forward in this House? For example, the King's speech yesterday, it only mentioned climate change twice. And here you are, this one member, up against essentially a conservative and a liberal party that the commands the majority of the House's seats together in the House of Commons. How do you make a dent in that?
Well, we don't know if there isn't a moment where I'll actually have the deciding vote. Things are that precarious. Obviously, there's 7 New Democrat Party members, and we don't always agree on everything. And they are, like me at this point, not considered a recognized party. But that's another place where I go to the rules. Under the rules, people who are members of Parliament in parties with fewer than 12 are still official parties and still have the right to sit on committees and still have the right for time and question period. The only thing that the recognized party rule, which is a law passed in '63, does is give those parties money, but there's nothing in there about rights. So I'll push on that. I'll push on every single time that we see, which we have not seen a single thing yet on paper, of what is the Liberal Party, what is Prime Minister Carney's plan on climate. We've seen nothing yet. We have to push hard on that. We have to make sure that we meet our Paris commitments. That's non-negotiable because the future of human civilization hangs in the balance. We don't have much time, and time is running out. So I'll push on that as hard as I can. And I know there are MPs in every single party who agree with me, whether their leaders agree with them or not.
Are you worried about Prime Minister Carney, though? Because he has emphasized economic growth, not a climate policy, as arguably the last Prime Minister did.
Yeah, Prime Minister Carney is at this point an enigma. Mark Carney, author, was pretty damn clear on what a carbon budget looks like, and that we're running out of time. Candidate Carney was murky. Prime Minister Carney is an enigma, and the throne speech doesn't shed much light on things. So I approach people giving them the benefit of the doubt. I want to see what we're going to do. But I met Tim Hodson for the first time the other day, our new Minister of Natural Resources, and he said, we want to get clean energy out. I said, that's right. And there are no clean fossil fuels. We haven't had a conversation. That's where it stopped. We'll keep working on it.
Okay. Well, Elizabeth May, for our conversation this evening, I appreciate it. I look forward to speaking to you throughout this Parliament. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael.